Welcome to the Emerging Lawyer series at the Coffee Corner Show powered by the Emerging India Forum TIF and a tech partner, Prime Infotech Solution. Theme is Designing Workplaces with Dignity, a conversation with Sairekha Sureshkumar. She is a corporate lawyer, workplace investigator, and now a founder of Lighthouse Legal. With nearly 2 decades of experience across India's top law firms and advisory roles, Sairekha has navigated high stakes mergers, internal workplace investigations, ESG compliance, and PoSH frameworks for some of the country's most dynamic organizations. Her work is grounded not only in legal rigor but also in lived experience, making her a powerful voice for building workplaces that are safe, inclusive, and resilient. Join us as we explore her journey, her insights into workplace justice, and the philosophy behind designing for dignity, not just compliance. So, welcome, Sairekha, and for your information, we just during the World Mental Health Day did a panel discussion on safe space. अपना beyond burnouts, creating safe space for the corporate minds, where we invited 4 coffee speakers.
Wow, that's so exciting. And thank you so much for the lovely introduction. And thank you so much for creating this space for professionals like us to come together and swap stories. Hello, viewers, and happy to be with you.
Yeah. So let me explain you. There'll be 3 rounds: professional journey, personal, and a surprise rapid fire round where you'll be witty, fun, and quick. And here's your book, Legal AI 101, which will be autographed and sent to you.
Can't
So
wait.
let's begin your first round. Friend of mine, Amir Virani, host at Coffee Corner, legal tech evangelist at Prime Infotech Solution, author of 15 books. So my first question, Saireka, from starting your career in M&A at top law firms to founding your own law firm, Lighthouse Legal, what sparked that shift and how has the journey been? This is my first part. Then, what's the story behind naming of your law firm, Lighthouse Legal?
Wow. Okay, great. So, Amir, I began my career, as you know, in classic corporate law, right? Large M&A, private equity work, a lot of private equity and infrastructure. And I've worked in some of the best names in the country, economic laws practice, AZB, J. Sagar, Desai Devanji. And those years, of course, this was the first decade of my career, and they gave me incredible training, clarity, pace, high pressure environments, and good judgment, thinking out of the box, working with frameworks, discipline. All of this came from my law firm life. But life has a way of, redirecting you. So in 2015, this is again exactly 10 years ago, there were a few personal circumstances that nudged me out of big firm life and into private practice. So when I started private practice, employment law at that point, it wasn't a grand plan. It found me. Okay. It was pure happenstance. I found myself helping friends and old clients and early stage founders, and I helped these people structure and run compliant businesses. And in that process, I discovered I loved the mix of law and the people that it involved. So around that time also, my journey with my other practice, Cohere Consultants, happened. And that's the primary practice where I do a lot of my workplace investigations. And that opened an entirely new dimension of work for me. Up until then, I was a pure trained corporate lawyer. And I sort of organically became this workplace investigator. And I started upskilling, I got my master's, I became an accredited mediator. And over the last 7 years, posh work also became a very deep part of my professional identity. I became known, or I developed a reputation as a lawyer who could be called to manage, discreet and complicated complaints and investigations. And that taught me how law can actually hold space for dignity, for fairness, and for repair, not just, being straight and narrow and for punishment. So while all of this was happening at Cohere, in the last 2, 3 years, startups started finding me and I found them. Their speed, their optimism, their chaos, just their dreams, all of that resonated. And out of that rhythm, Lighthouse Legal was born. Okay. Lighthouse Legal, and as you asked me, the name was actually an inside joke with a very dear friend who's also a client. This friend has an AI and robotics company. And this friend said, "Oh, you are a lighthouse in a sea of bad legal advice. And I'm so happy I found you." And I was always based out of Bombay. The sea always resonated. It just happened organically. And Lighthouse Legal is a practice, an unorthodox practice, if I may. This was built for fast moving, purpose driven companies, growing companies with dreams who want to grow responsibly. So the shift was not, leaving one kind of law. It was very happenstance, very organic. But this basically allowed my career to evolve in a way that matched who I was becoming, somebody who believes that good law needs both EQ and IQ in equal measure.
Wow. So let's build a conversation, Sairekha. How do you balance legal compliance with cultural sensitivity when advising startups and fast growth companies?
Hmm. Different strokes for different folks, right, Amir? See, startups, they move fast. We all know that. They're diverse, they're informal, they're often cross cultural. So you can't just drop like a 60-page policy document into that environment and say, okay, this is compliance. So, what I learned when I worked with startups is that we translate law into language that people can relate to. So, this could be clean, straightforward, simple, practical contracts, or it could be a 2-page playbook, or even a 15-minute town hall. It still meets the spirit of the law, but it finds the rhythm of that business, that newly evolved business. To contrast, traditional or legacy businesses, legacy companies, on the other hand, they often have the opposite challenge. They have structured hierarchies, they have, set processes, cast in stone, and a lot of institutional memory, both learnings and baggage. So, in those spaces, our role is to help them evolve without losing their backbone, without losing their identity, and yet to modernize policy, to adapt policy without breaking continuity. So, what ties both together is this: legal frameworks and policies. Let's call them the hardware for compliance. Okay, you need them. But the software is people and mindset. This is where your cultural sensitivity comes in. You can have the best written policy in the world, but if your culture doesn't run it, it's just paper. Okay, so that's where EQ driven approaches come in. At least that's how we operate at Lighthouse. We work with leaders to make sure that their people understand not just what the law says, but why it matters. Because good compliance isn't really about control, it's really about consciousness. Of course, a lot of these philosophies operate with both my practices, Lighthouse and Cohere, and that's the journey.
Wow. So, having seen both traditional firms and new age companies, how different are the approaches to workplace conflict?
Again, you've nailed it. Very, very uh, interesting question. I think the biggest gap is that traditional legal advisory is built for transactions, okay, not for transformation. It's designed to close the deal, to be effective in that deal, and not to stay with the organization really as it evolves and as it dreams. So the focus is on what is legally airtight for that transaction, but not always what's humanly sustainable. So part of that, okay, and this comes from the way big firms are structured. And I've had a lot of time to think about this. And I feel, that in large firms, they look at partnerships as their partners being other lawyers with a shared book. The relationships are internal, they're committed to the practice, they're hierarchical, and they're often disconnected from each of their clients' long-term story. Okay. They're effective in short-term assignments, but they're not really tying their firm's identity to a client's long-term story. And with India being now startup central, okay, this was a space where a lot of startups who came to me started, voicing this. So when we created Lighthouse, I designed it to be an unorthodox, reimagined practice that sees our clients as our partners, okay, in their own transformation stories. So we don't call ourselves outside counsel or external counsel. We call ourselves embedded counsel, okay? We don't just help their transactions, we help shape their policy. We sort of look into their DNA and, we sort of help them imagine their DNA with legal frameworks. We anticipate risk before it becomes conflict and we stay on. And I think that's where we're different. We stay on to see how these decisions play out. So for fast growing businesses, of course, particularly in tech, robotics, drones, where a lot of Lighthouse clients sit, and other emerging and disruptive technology sectors, that partnership model is very critical. Okay, they don't need dense memos or formal opinions. They really need clear judgment, commercial empathy, and real-time guidance that meets their speed. So yeah, that's us. We're not about closing legal gaps only. We're closing emotional and structural gaps. We are closing these gaps between, say, law and leadership, growth and governance, but certainly between IQ and EQ.
Wow. So, as a workplace investigator, how do you maintain neutrality while also being trauma informed?
Hmm. This is again a very, very nuanced question. And, I'm so happy that you're asking all these right questions. Now, the thing about neutrality and trauma informed is a tightrope that every good investigator has to walk. All right. And unlike what people perceive from the outside, I feel that neutrality and empathy are not opposite approaches. They're actually two expressions of professional discipline. And let me explain. Okay. For me, neutrality isn't about being detached or robotic or even disconnected. Okay, it's about not letting your feelings or fears inform the entire investigation process. So, what that means is that you are, let's say, in a situation, not swayed by how emotional or angry or sad or composed or controlled or poignant or eloquent, somebody is showing up in the investigation, or even by how uncomfortable, a person's statement or beliefs make you feel while you're in that seat. Okay, you stay anchored in evidence and procedure. So when you're neutral, what you're effectively doing is that you're not reacting, you are responding. And that's what the investigation seeks from you. Okay. Trauma informed, on the other hand, now this is a lens. It shapes how you listen, how you hold space for people during an investigation. So when you are trauma informed, you're not really taking sides. Okay. It's just because you're trauma informed, it doesn't mean that, you are conforming to a certain side of the story, or you're enabling or you're preferring one party over the other. What you're actually doing is that you're creating psychological safety so that people can tell their stories to you, their truth, without being re-traumatized by how daunting a due process is. If you've ever been in an investigation, and I really don't will it on the best of people, because it's very, very stressful, right? Because of just how formal it is, because of the consequences. So you allow people, by using a trauma informed approach, to tell their stories comfortably, with dignity, and without being re traumatized by the process. So sometimes that's as simple as slowing down your pace when you're talking to people, right? You make your presence smaller, अपने आप को छोटा कर लेते हो जब moment बड़ा लगता है, right? You choose your words carefully, you think through how you frame a sentence. You make sure that you're sensitive when you're asking a question, that you're not alluding to anything, that you're not putting a person on the spot, or you even allow many a times for silence to do the work. Okay. So trauma informed is a technique, it's a lens. Neutrality is a stance, is a compliant behavior. And I honestly feel that the best investigators have equal measures of both structure and sensitivity. So, your attention to detail, your analysis of facts, your correlation of evidence, your understanding of procedure, even your subject matter knowledge. So, if you're getting into a forensic or a PoSH or some kind of ethics investigation, your subject matter knowledge, particularly cyber crime and those kind of complaints, subject matter knowledge becomes very, very important. And all of that
Yes.
is vital, right? But that's your hardware. Now, reading the room, managing that moment, now that's your soft skill, your software. And you can't use hardware without having real software. You need to read the room. So, real neutrality lives in discipline, in awareness, but mostly in respect. Does that help,
Wow.
Amir?
Yeah, yeah. So you have an experience of doing or leading 500 internal investigations. What makes a workplace inquiry truly fair and effective? I'm dividing into parts. When an organization appoints you as a workplace investigator, what are your first steps before you meet with the affected person?
Hmm. Okay. So for me, let's go to the first part of your question. A fair inquiry begins long before the first question is asked. It starts with your due process, okay? It starts with, of course, background reading. You need to understand what material is available, but you also need to ensure when you start the process that notices are clear, okay? Timelines are clear and timelines are followed, okay? And that both parties know what to expect. So, clarity and transparency. These are, I would say, architecture for fairness. During process, okay, particularly when you're doing due process, it's not a procedural checklist. Many times people are like, acha, acha, SOP, check, 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 1, 2, 3, 4. No. When you are doing due process right, okay, it satisfies not just the spirit of the law, but also the purpose of the policy that's written, that is driving this process. So when you're doing due process right, you're building credibility. Parties feel safe in the process. That's your first tell. Okay. Companies feel compliant, while rolling out an investigation. They feel like, okay, we're on the right side of law. We've got our bases covered. And let's say at a later stage, God forbid, a regulator or a court, ever feel that a departmental inquiry needs to come under scrutiny, then when they're looking at the work, they will recognize due process. They will recognize that neutrality has happened and application of mind has happened. So that's why, fair inquiries look rooted in not just process, but also clarity and transparency. But fairness isn't technical, mind you, Amir. I've seen how unconscious bias can quietly shape perception, especially when you're sitting in with other investigators, how confident person who comes, like a confident respondent can come and sound very, very believable, or somebody more senior can come across as more respectable, compared to a quieter person or a more junior person. And how, language and tone of how people show up in these conversations can also, carry unintended weight in people's minds when they listen. So as investigators, we have to stay very self-aware. We have to question our own assumptions at each point in time, and we have to look beyond presentation to the actual substance. We have to look at facts, we have to look at hardcore evidence, but we also have to look at context and tone and timing, right? So to me, an effective inquiry is where the due process meets discernment. It's legally sound, it's procedurally consistent, and emotionally intelligent. And because true fairness lies in not just what we declare or what we decide, but how we declare and decide it. So to come back to your second part, you say, what do you do first? I do my background work. I understand the culture, I understand the policy, I understand what is available, I understand the framework. I look at what are the hardware that seems to power this process. I look at what context, what tone, what timing. I look at the framework. If there is none, I create it. I look at how to put the team together. So it's a little bit of logistics as well. And then I jump head in. Does that make sense?
Wow. So, Sairika, if you could redesign one aspect of how Indian organizations handle bias and conflict, what would it be?
If I could redesign, is it?
Yes.
Hmm. Actually, if I had to redesign one aspect, I would say I would redesign the way we listen. Okay. Most organizations treat conflict and bias as events to control the story, control the event, and not signals to understand what's happening deeper in their fabric. They react through procedure. They do, ironclad or internal or heavy investigations. They move through warnings, transfers, but rarely do they sit back and reflect on why, on how, on what it's done to the fabric, or what is the tear in the fabric that's causing this. So I see many a times within organizations today that systems are built to contain disruption, not to learn from it. So I would love to see more cultures of repair that are coming out, okay, where discomfort is not buried, or discomfort or any of these aberrations, like a complaint is not looked at something to be feared, right? So many people say, I'm so glad we don't have so many complaints this year. I want that to change. I want us to take disruptions and complaints as opportunities to listen and to examine what's happening on ground in the companies, on the workplaces, on the work floors with maturity and curiosity. Now, see, this requires a shift. Okay. You have to operate your mindset from a fear based model of compliance to one that's rooted in accountability, in awareness, but most probably, the word that everyone hates, which is empathy. And part of that shift, okay, Amir, this means that seeing your lawyer, your counsel as a collaboration and not as a cost. Lawyers should not be brought in to, clean the mess up. We should be designing systems together. We should work together proactively and not reactively. So that's the change I want to see.
Beautiful. So, my next question, ESG and AI risk are still evolving in India. How do you see them shaping the legal landscape in the next 5 years?
Wow. Amir, we're in a really interesting moment where both ESG and AI are forcing us to redefine what responsibility looks like, okay, for companies, for founders, and certainly for lawyers. ESG started the conversation around environmental and social governance, and AI has now completely pushed and catapulted us into the digital realm. So we're now all about data bias ethics, right? And in India, I think the next 5 years will be about integration, okay? Bringing these frameworks out of, just your annual reports and into your daily decision making. See, ESG can't live in sustainability cells, okay? And AI governance cannot be something that only a tech team understands. These concepts need to become boardroom questions. Only then can we truly see integration. Now, Amir, I hear echoes of my own fears, okay, my own concerns, whether it's when you're navigating global think tanks or you're reading peers, their articles and policy circles. People say, and I fear this too, that technology is evolving far faster than policy is able to keep up. है ना? So, at an existential level, okay, we're consuming and we're combusting faster than we're creating and conserving. So, this imbalance is showing up everywhere, okay? How we design systems, how we hire, how we regulate, there's always a gap. So, I think that the next evolution of law will bring interdisciplinary lawyers, okay? People who can work at the intersectionality of code, conservation, and conscience. Only then will the future be sustainable. Companies that will truly thrive are the ones that embed accountability by design. Okay. Uh, you should look at places where compliance, ethics, and empathy find a way to coexist in the same architecture. If we leave one, the imbalance is going to be apparent. And that's the future that excites me. And that's the future, at least I personally, selfishly want to partner to build. Okay. One where law doesn't chase technology, but it shapes it.
Beautiful. So, Sairika, many organizations view compliance as a roadblock. How do you reframe it as an enabler of growth for companies?
Hmm. It's a great question, Amir. I've also been thinking about this exact thing a lot because this is something that you bounce off again and again when clients interact with you about their requirements and about partnering. I think, okay, that the mindset that compliance is a roadblock, it really comes from how compliance has been traditionally delivered, okay, like a policing function. It's been about, up until now, if you see, compliance is driven by what? Laws, regulators breathing down your neck, and a set of hefty fines and punishments when you don't comply. But you rarely look at compliance as a partnership tool with your people, with your employees, right? And that's the shift that I believe in to remove this roadblock mentality. When you reframe compliance as an enabler, everything changes. When I really started understanding compliance after a couple of years of practicing it, I realized that it's actually the operating system that allows a company to scale safely. People don't see how compliance is a scale tool, okay? It's what gives founders peace of mind and it gives teams predictability. And those two things are basically the oxygen for growth, okay? If you have some kind of a growth mindset for your business today, okay, you should see compliance as alignment and invest in it. You should not look at it as a bare minimum checklist exercise कि चलो ये नहीं किया तो फाइन लगेगा and अगर फाइन नहीं है तो करना नहीं चाहिए. Okay, startups particularly are so often advised to do little or no compliance because this is seen as a cost. Ironically, let me tell you that governance maturity, and you know this, right, Amir? Ultimately, governance maturity becomes part of their valuation story. Investors look for hygiene, not just financial hygiene, but legal hygiene, infrastructural, cultural, even ethical hygiene when they're looking to invest in a startup. At least if you want a quality investor. Flip the script to larger mid-segment organizations, established, tier one companies. Compliance here is something that builds trust internally and also reputational strength externally. I mean, come on, anybody in the Hindenburg report, everybody's like scrunching your nose looking at them, right? Or anybody who's in the headlines or being tweeted for the wrong reasons. So yeah, reputational strength is certainly something that you get when you are usually compliant and you're keeping your neck above water. And I've had the privilege to work with both kinds of clients, okay? Your young companies that are building and scaling, and also your established giants, okay, that are reinventing themselves and they're seeing where they, stay relevant in 2025. And the common truth between both of them is that whether you're a rocket ship or whether you're a Goliath, you need robust compliance to be sustainable.
Wow. So, Sairika, you have been in the earlier stints in M&A. Yeah, how's the experience in using Workshare compare the Delta View, the original software?
Wow. I think Delta View was so essential to all the transaction work that I used to do back in the day. Because before, other softwares developed, Delta View was the forerunner. Okay. And Delta View was, in that sense, the truth serum. It used to show documents in the manner in which the counterparty would have, doctored it or edited it. So insightful, so much of feedback. Loved Delta View. I mean, wow. Yeah.
So, my last question for a professional journey round, Sairika, what advice would you give to young lawyers looking to specialize in employment law and workplace inclusion?
Thank you for asking this question, and I love answering this of everything that you've asked me because this field really needs more thoughtful lawyers. Okay. So, my first advice would be simple: please build judgment before jargon. Employment law, and let me explain why, this sits between people and process, okay, but also rights and responsibilities. So you're constantly balancing individual dignity with what's the organization's greater good, interests of the individual versus interest of the organization. And that takes discernment. Just knowledge won't get you through, okay? And something else a little more personal is that when I started working 2 decades ago, is that the thrill initially of my first job was financial independence. But very quickly, I realized that what meant to me, what work really showed up for me was it was about respect. It was about how it shaped my identity, how it shaped my self worth. So you can't practice employment law without understanding that respect is what it truly drives people to go to work. Okay. Policy gives structure, but respect gives meaning. So please understand that when you're dealing with employment, you're dealing with these fragile aspects of human nature as well. So don't mistake neutrality for detachment if you want to be an investigator. That's the third thing I want to tell you. Okay. The best lawyers here have empathy, but they don't have bias. They listen deeply, they respond, not react mindfully, and they hold space responsibly. And my last advice, and this is for everyone, whether you want to be an employment lawyer or whether you just really want to be in law, stay curious. Read beyond law and upskill constantly. Okay. Soft skills are great. Okay. Also learn about businesses, how they operate, learn a little bit of code. We are in the future where everything is being, run by code. Learn about financials. And the more perspectives you bring to the table, the sharper your judgment becomes. Workplace law is not only compliance, check, 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 okay? It's about designing systems where you want clarity, you want structure, you want reason to coexist with compassion and dignity. It's the structure and how you merge it to who it's intended to protect. So you have this and you're in business.
Beautiful. So, let's go to next round and understand Sairika as a person. Tell us about your family and your formative years.
Wow. I think this section I find harder than talking about work, but I'm going to try. Okay, I onboarded a new team this morning, right? And I introduced myself as one half of what these Gen Zs call a dink ward, dual income, no kids with a dog household. So that's one half of that is me. We're mostly based in Bombay, and I really operate out of my suitcase because I go where my clients need me. In terms of my formative years, I come from a traditional Tamil speaking family. And if you know your Tamil family, you know that education is usually a way of life, it's at the heart of things. My mother's side is full of academics, uncles who are scientists. We have a Padma Shri in my family. And my father's side are the dreamers, the artists, the entrepreneurs. We have a national award winning filmmaker in the family. And I grew up in the middle of all of these wonderful people in Kochi, which again is a very, very interesting city. Um, I went to a school that taught me both scripture, but it also made me play sport and sent me to exchange programs with British schools. I woke up to MS Subbulakshmi, but also Michael Jackson, depending on who got to the music system first. I moved cities a lot in my early years. So I think you can see a lot of my balance in my early influences and how I wrap my head around all these contrasts. I think it's shaped how I see the world and it's shaped who I am.
Wow, beautiful. So let's go to your college days. ILS Law College and then Jindal Global Law School. What are your memories and experience from there?
Wow. Okay. You know, ILS was easily the best 5 years of my life. So, ILS, I don't know how many of you have gone to this law school. It's in Pune. And this is a stunning old world campus. Okay. It's all red brick and banyan trees. It's got a little private hill. Okay. But it's
Hmm.
oddly also a place where you have the most traditional faculty teaching you the most practical ways to practice law in the new world. So, they teach you perspective, compassion, there's a sense of resilience, there's a little bit of dignity, very, very old world legal education. In fact, if you go and see ILS, and if you ever have the ILS experience, and I've gone back to college recently, it's a little time capsule, okay? And that's ILS for me. It's something so old world, but that prepared me for the new world. Jindal is a more recent experience, stunning, stunning education there as well. I did my master's with them in the pandemic 15 years later. And this was so different, but so necessary. It catapulted me straight into this decade. Okay. It retooled for me modern lawyering. I interacted with so many of these modern subject matter expert professors, thought leaders. It really sort of put my research skills on steroids, connected me to different thought leaders. It forced me to reflect on each and every aspect of the law. Why is a certain provision there? Where does it come from? Why does it exist? So, to sum it up, ILS gave me roots, Jindal gave me reach. And between the two, I have my rhythm now.
Beautiful. Okay. So outside of law and work, what is your hobby or activity which brings you the most joy?
I travel, 100% travel. And if I'm stuck indoors, it's reading.
Wow. Okay. So doing a research, uh, you are with a type 1 diabetes. My question is, what role has family played in shaping your resilience while living with type 1 diabetes?
It's a very, very nuanced question. Okay. See, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in 1996. At that point, we had no internet, literally. And there was very limited technology. Today, we have a lot of AI driven tools and algorithm driven machinery that's helping manage type 1 diabetes in almost near normal ways. Okay. But back in the day, that was not the case. So there was a lot of stigma and shame. People used to look at you, society used to look at you like you were broken. Grandmothers used to say, लड़की है, मत बताया करो लोगों को डायबिटीज है, शादी नहीं होगी, इसके पता नहीं फ्यूचर का क्या होगा. And at that point, my parents were very loud advocates. They taught me to stand up to feelings of shame and stigma. And they said, no, you're not broken. Accept yourself. So I think they laid the foundation of what I'd like to call my Kintsugi era. If you see something's broken, that you fill it up by healing yourself with little, little gold, then you become better than where you are. So yeah, that's my parents. They taught me to stand up and they taught me to accept.
Beautiful. So you said okay, you like books. So do you have a book, film, music playlist which you turn to during your happy times and sad times?
Actually, it's a TV show. If I have the worst day on the week, I randomly pick an episode of Friends. I think it's nostalgia, but I always laugh. But depending on just how much motivation I need, I sometimes watch a rerun of Finding Nemo or Pursuit of Happiness. And both those movies really, really, tell me that, yeah, you can keep swimming, you can go on.
Wow. Okay, since you said you also like to travel, what's your favorite travel memory? The one place you did revisit again and again.
Oh, wow. India is so beautiful. But something that if I really close my eyes and I want to go to a happy place, my husband and I spent a week in Sikkim, literally waking up to the orange peaks of the Kanchenjunga. Every time I close my eyes, I go back there, see the silhouette of the Kanchenjunga, and I see this beautiful orange hue of the sun when it kisses it at sunrise. Yeah, that's core memory, and I think I want to go back
Oh.
there.
So if your friends had to describe you in three words, what would they say?
3 words. Okay, I think they will say articulate, kind, has perspective. That's four.
Wow. So what's one personal milestone, non-professional,
Ah,
that you're deeply proud of?
right. 30 years of not surviving, but really thriving with type 1 diabetes, but also, taking lived experiences and creating communities, creating advocacy platforms so that more and more
Mhm.
people could normalize this condition, more people could connect with each other. So, yeah, that's definitely a personal triumph. Today, India is seen in the world as a model for how diabetes communities work together and how they advocate. I'm now on WHO panels, I'm on different advisory boards, I go to events worldwide. I am a vocal advocate, and I've seen what Indian communities we've done for each other, and how we're a unified voice. So yeah, and the fact that I was a part of that creation and growth story, very very proud.
Beautiful. So my last one is a googly one. Describe Sairekha in one line.
Really, I think you're asking me to put the universe in a tiny little teacup, but I'll try. I want to think that I'm a curious, but I'm also a grateful person who brings empathy, but also intellect together to make growth, to make dreams feel human again. And this applies not just to work, but also to life.
Wow, beautiful. So let's put in a hot seat, you rapid fire round. Your go-to comfort food.
Rasam rice.
Your favorite color.
It depends, but white.
You're a morning person or a night owl.
Night owl. God, night owl.
Uh, Sweet tooth indulgence, cake or chocolate.
Chocolate.
Best piece of advice received.
Always leave things better than you find them. And this is my dad.
Structured planner or spontaneous adventurer.
Bit of both, usually spontaneous.
Wow. Tea or coffee to recharge.
Coffee, 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 coffee.
Yes. So you did well in your book, which will
Yay.
autograph to you. So, as we wrap up, it's clear that Sairekha brings more than just legal expertise to the table. She brings empathy, resilience, and a vision for workplaces where dignity is non negotiable. Her journey reminds us that law is not only about contracts and compliance, but also about people, culture, and fairness. So thank you, Sairika, for sharing your story and your insights. And to our audience, we hope this conversation leaves you inspired to rethink how we can all contribute to building a healthier and more inclusive workplaces. So, like that, there are 500 plus coffee speakers sharing their professional personal journeys. Subscribe, implement in your lives, and we continue our conversation with another speaker or a cup of coffee. Thank you. Take care.
Have a great week, folks.